Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. Breakfast helps brands like HelloFresh, Perfume.com, and QVC increase revenue across Meta and TikTok by creating hundreds of user-generated content video ads. The Breakfast Creator Network, with over 5,000 strong, produces original content that is authentic to each platform and built to drive performance, all done in as little as 3 weeks. Check out breakfast.io. That's BRKFST.io. Welcome to this week's KPOV. Today's date is December 11th, and here's the headline. Looks like another miracle on 34th Street. Macy's has offered $5.8 billion for the company by Ark House Management and Brigade Capital. Together, those firms believe the real estate value is greater, even much greater than what the company was valued at, and they believe there is value to be unlocked. That said, let's look back at history when Eddie Lampert thought there was a lot of real estate value and he bought both Kmart and Sears. Well, that didn't end so well for Kmart and Sears. And we're still trying to figure out how well that ended for Eddie Lampert, though I'd have to believe he actually made money on that deal. Finally, Richard Baker in 2013 also thought he had a great deal buying Saks for $2.9 billion, even though the value of the Saks store in Manhattan was valued at more than that. That being said, 10 years later, Saks has had some financial troubles, although they did just make an offer to buy Neiman Marcus for $3 billion. That deal was rejected. So at the end of the day, is this a good opportunity for Macy's? We'll have to wait and see. Macy's has done a lot to really reformat their company by getting rid of underperforming stores. And as we discussed on our prior podcast, moving to a smaller format, which seems to be working quite well. News at 11. Now, back to our previously recorded podcast. Dave Powers serves as president and CEO of Deckers Brands, a global footwear and apparel company based in Santa Barbara, California. He focuses on long-term growth and Omni Channel strategies for the company's 5 high-performing brands that include Uggs, Teva, Sanuk, Hoka, and Koolaburra. In 2020, Dave was named a 2020 Business Person of the Year by Fortune, ranking number 13 on their list of top executives. Dave also ranked on the list of Barron's top CEOs of 2023. Dave is passionate about consumer-led insight and innovation, as well as doing great in business and doing good for people and the planet. Prior to joining Deckers in 2012, Dave held executive leadership roles at Converse and Timberland. Dave graduated cum laude from Northeastern University with a bachelor's degree in marketing. Now residing in Santa Barbara, he enjoys spending time outdoors with his wife and 2 sons. Super excited to have with me today Dave Powers, CEO of Deckers, longtime friend and former colleague from days at the Gap. Dave, welcome to the Retail Pilot.
Thanks, Ken. It's a little surreal to be in this room with you after all these years.
It's crazy. We go back. We won't put years on it. We have to put years on it. We were probably together. We were together till I left. I left in 99,
yeah,
2000. And I think you were still there, but we did a lot of work together in international.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning, all the traveling we used to do to Europe and Japan, and we had some fun times.
It was good. We can't go into that in detail because we got to keep our PG rating here. No, we were good boys. We were all good. Dave, tell us a little bit about your journey, because you kind of started on the apparel side, and at some point along the way, you came up with this foot fetish, and here you are.
Yeah, I mean, you want the full, long story, or
yeah, just go into it. I think it's interesting where you started, and how did you even get into retail?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So first of all, I would say I don't consider myself a footwear guru or footwear guy. I'm more of a brand guy. But
Because there are like shoe dogs in the world.
yeah,
That's a whole
I don't even
different
know what a shoe
breed.
dog is.
Right. There you go.
But it's interesting. Let's start this way. I was 27 years old, living with my parents in a small town in New Hampshire after college, and trying to sell advertising. I was a runner for UPS. Like, it was a rough time, and I was in a relationship that was not great. And so one day I said to my parents and my girlfriend, I said, I'm out of here. I got to change this up because I'm not heading in the direction that I want to go. And then during that time, I had dabbled in designing apparel, and had a t-shirt line I was selling. I was going to raves and selling t-shirts, and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a business degree from Northeastern, and so one day I just packed everything I owned in the back of my car and drove up to San Francisco. And the goal at the time was I either want to work for Levi's or the Gap. And I don't know why. I just picked those two, and they were in San Francisco.
And what year is this?
This is 97.
Okay.
Yeah, January 97. And drove across country in a Dodge Colt that wasn't supposed to make it. And I landed there, and I immediately started temping. One of my biggest skills was typing. So I would type temp jobs, and I actually got a job at Levi's temping on design. And then one day I interviewed a friend of mine who was working at the Gap, a friend of a friend, and I said, hey, I really want to get into marketing. And they said, we really don't have a marketing department. And so I said, what do you got? And they told me about merchandising. I'd never heard of it. I said, cool, I want to interview for that. And they said, well, the best thing to do is start in the stores. And I was like, listen, I'm 27, I got a degree, I got all this experience. I don't know, I don't want to be a store manager. But long story short, I ended up taking the job. I was making $13,000 a year on Polk Street as an assistant manager, temping on my days off. But once I got that itch of like merchandising and apparel and visual, and I knew I found my passion. And so I was fortunate enough to be in San Francisco, met some people from corporate, and landed a assistant job under Gary Muto. And kind of the rest is history. It's not, the rest is history, but that's how I got into it. But I freaking loved it. I loved the work. I didn't necessarily love the culture at Gap. As you know, it was very competitive, cutthroat. And so I didn't thrive. I would say I survived my days at Gap, like 10 years. But I learned a ton under, people like you and Gary and Mickey and Robin Rice and Lisa Salamone and Patty Gazzato, and I still refer to that time, daily basis at work. There's so many foundational things that I learned there. And it run its course. We had an incredible run in international. I mean, we did breakthrough stuff at that time. It was unbelievable.
Great. It was fun.
Traveling to Hong Kong and meeting with factories. It was just mind blowing. But it ran its course. And, at the end of my time there, I was reporting to Mickey right after you left for a little while. And then when he left, I could tell things were going downhill because we had a new CEO, Paul Pressler, started bringing in Mackenzie. And I was like, this is the beginning of the end. So we're now moving to strategy and insights away from intuition in merchant. So anyway, I had a mentor at Gap, Mike Tucci. And I asked him, hey, you have any advice what I should do? And he said, well, let me look around. Let me talk to my friends. And I'm originally from New Hampshire. And so he said, I got a buddy of mine, Mark Schneider. He's at Timberland. I said, that's perfect. I always thought it'd be cool to work at Timberland.
Now, for the record, this is where Dave and I have a history together.
Yeah.
Mark Schneider was my first boss. Well, he wasn't my boss, but he hired me to join the Macy's training program where I worked prior to working for the Gap. So we have that connection as well.
Yeah. Do you want to tell that analogy? You said, because you were going to pick either Macy's or...
Yeah, it was at the time, I think it was I was offered $20,000 to work at Lord & Taylor or $19,000 to work at Macy's. And Schneider told Mark, I think I'm going to go to Lord & Taylor. And he looked at me and he said, fella, look at me. Who's the first baseman for the Seattle Pilots? I was like, I have no idea. And then he said, well, who's the first baseman for the New York Yankees? And I said, Joe Pepitone or whoever it was at the time. He goes, okay. I said, I got it. So I went with Schneider.
Yep. And
so then Tucci turned you on to Schneider.
Yep. So, he said, hey, I'll connect you. And I didn't hear from him. In the meantime, I had accepted a job with Eddie Bauer. And my wife, Caroline, and I were looking at houses in Seattle. And then, I get a call from Schneider one day. He's like, first thing he says is, I got a job for you. And I was like, I haven't even met you, dude. Like, he's like, if Tucci says you're great, then I'll give you a job. And I was like, well, I got to make a decision quick. And he's like, well, get on the red eye tonight. Come here tomorrow. I did. I got on the red eye, flew to New Hampshire. I met with, Mark, Jeff Schwartz, the CEO, Ken Pucker, the COO, and some others. And I was in, they believed in me for some odd reason. And then they made me an offer the next morning. And so we changed our plans. We canceled Seattle, moved back to New Hampshire. And I was, working on the retail team, the e-commerce team, and merchandising, planning, visual, all that. Had a blast.
So that gave you a lot more breadth than you had at Gap, because Gap is very like
Yeah.
you're running denim, we're running a division,
Exactly.
kids, but there you had experience with everything. I mean, you were really starting to get your Omni wheels on, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, and I realized that merchandising, I loved it, but I wanted more. Like I really love visual, I love marketing, and I see a lot of people that are still in that merchandising career 20 years later, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it, man. I would be bored out of my mind. So, but that's just me, but that gave me the opportunity to ultimately become more of a GM, right? A general merchandise manager, and then onto this role. So, anyway, I spent a year in retail. I spent 2 years under Schneider in product and strategy, which working with designers. That was amazing. And then I was asked to go to Europe and help the retail business over there. Spent 3 years over there, overseeing the retail, franchise, and e-commerce business. Ran global merchandising, implemented new store designs. I mean, I was just having a ball. And I think ultimately I was feeding my creative aspirations. I love the business. I love figuring out how to optimize businesses, but I have a real strong creative side too. Anyway, that ran its course for 5 years. I started losing faith in leadership and where the company was going. So I took an opportunity at Converse to oversee DDC. It was a new role, and Jack Boys was the CEO at the time.
Was Converse part of Nike at this point?
Yeah.
They were already, it was, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Because Nike purchased Converse for those out there.
Exactly. Yep. So I was interviewed by the head of Nike affiliates at the time, Lee Bird. And then, so when I joined, Lee had left and Gene Jackson was the new head of DDC, president of DDC for Nike. So I was reporting to Jack and Gene at the same time. As you can imagine, a little schizophrenic and very different people,
Wow.
but I learned a ton from both of them.
And Gene Jackson, also a former Gapper, who Gene was the head of Banana Republic. They left Gap to actually start Walmart.com.
Yeah, exactly.
And then went on to be a pretty senior player at Nike.
Yeah. And on the board of McDonald's. And I mean, she's
a rock
force.
star.
Yeah. And so, people were intimidated by her. I was at first, but then we ended up, having a lot of mutual respect and, became friends, and I learned a ton from her. It was interesting. So anyway, but I knew at some point, because she kept telling me, you got to come to Nike, small time, you're in the small minor leagues at Converse, come to Nike. And I remember she offered me an opportunity to run outlet in the US and move to Portland. And I said, Gene, thank you, but that sounds like so boring to me. And she's like, it's $1 billion business.
It's a moneymaker.
It's a big deal. It's the right profit center at the time. I said, yeah, but it's one channel, one market, one brand. Like, I'll lose my mind. I'm too ADD for something like that. And then I didn't want to live in Portland. And so, I've always picked my career changes based on brand and location.
Well, look how well you did here.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so
fast forward.
I always said to my wife, Caroline, someday I want to live in Santa Barbara and work for Patagonia. And when I got this call, I said, I got to check this out. And we were happy in New Hampshire. The kids were happy. And then I came here and met Angel, the CEO, and he and I hit it off, very like-minded. He believed in DDC. And so I said, this is going to be it. Like, let's go give it a shot. Potential, I could move into the CEO role. At that time, I never thought it would be possible. And so that was 11 years ago, and knock on wood, I'm still here.
It's awesome. Now, you got here just, 2012?
Yeah, August 12.
Was that just at the same time that they had just purchased Hoka, or was it just before?
Just before. Yeah. So around the same time. And it was, I wasn't too involved in that decision. I heard about it. I got Angel asked me my thoughts. And I said, well, it's hard for me to say, running better than I do. So, yeah.
You brought in 2012. What was your charge? What were you tasked to do? And which brand were you focused on?
Yeah. So I was hired to create the function of direct to consumer. So at that point, they had an e-commerce business for Uggs and Teva and Sanuk and a couple other smaller brands. And, whether it was China or London or, in New York City, the stores are just crushing it. So it was an easy sell to the board to say, let's invest in this. Let's roll out stores globally, both owned and partner. And we combined, the retail and the e-commerce teams. We leveraged planners and merchants across both channels and just invested in systems and omni channel capabilities and talent. And we had a great run until the brand got a little bit stagnant. because we were a one-trick pony at that time. It was all about the classic Ugg. And, profitability started declining. And there's a whole nother story about activists and all that stuff. But that was the genesis for my role here, was create the DTC function. And fortunately, the board and Angel believed in retail. And we had some board members, ex-Gap and Coach, who were also gung-ho on retail. And I was like, finally, I'm at a brand that values retail.
And you were focused on D2C for all the brands, or really
all brands?
All brands.
Yeah.
Okay.
At that point, UGG was
that was really Uggs.
Of it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there tension inside the company, D2C versus wholesale? What was that like in these? I can only imagine the silos that must have existed.
Yeah, massive. Like, I was not popular.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, right.
That was like when I was starting Outlet at Gap. I would call people and they wouldn't answer the phone. It was like,
you were in their office.
They're running out of their office.
Yeah, we used to joke, shut the door, Ken's in the hall. He's going to steal our samples. But yeah, no, it was that tension because we were basically just wholesale machine. With the whole company was structured around feeding Nordstrom's, essentially, our number one customer.
It's interesting, it's very, I guess, consistent when you look at the footwear business. You think about Steve Madden, you think about Skechers. A lot of these companies just all began as such strong wholesale companies.
Yeah.
And then we started to see over time this transition away from wholesale into D2C.
Yeah. And people were really fearful of it, just like Outlet, at the Gap. And I remember when we started Gap Online, people were afraid of that, right? It's going to steal our business. And so, it took a lot of relationship building, right? And I've learned a lot through that on, how to create collaboration and trust and partnership. And, that's everything in this world. So it was tough. And we're still not perfect. We still have that kind of tension in certain areas of the country. We're getting better at it, though.
2016, you're made CEO and you're responsible now for the company.
Yeah.
Now, what was your charge? What were the challenges you were facing when you took over the company in 2016?
It's interesting. I don't know that I really had a charge. It was, you're the new CEO, right? And, I think the board was, in Angel at the time where he was looking to retire at some point. And, and I was me and Angel were very close and we were very like-minded and we operated the same way. And, he had a lot of trust and confidence in me. And so he fortunately identified me as successor. And, I pretty much more just stepped into the role. And I remember him saying at one point, you don't have to shake things up too much. Things are pretty good. Just stay with it. But the first thing I did is I said to my CFO at the time, I had to gain respect and confidence from all of my peers, right? So it was pretty tough. But I remember saying, I got to understand what the makeup of this business really looks like. And so we brought in consultant Alex Partners to, just lay it out for me. It's like, where are the dead soldiers? Where's the opportunity and margin? Where's the drains? And we quickly realized we got a lot of work to do because our operating margin at that point had dropped to like 8%.
Wow.
It used to be above 20.
Which is incredible.
It was incredible, right? But it was all wholesale, one brand,
Sure.
And so we started working on a profit improvement plan, and we've identified all this, savings and opportunities. And so that was really, the genesis of a long range strategy that was, improve our operating margin, solidify the brands, dump some unproductive businesses. And we've been on that journey ever since, really just optimizing the model.
Curious how you approach the business, because at this point you have 3 brands that are growing. You have between Uggs, Hoka, Teva to some degree. How did you look at the company in terms of structure? Because we had a structure at Gap. The closer to the product, the more brand specific people were, the further away, the greater the sharing of responsibility. How did you organize, or was it already organized, the company to handle the different brands?
It's a great question. So I would say there's a couple things we did. One is identified brands that weren't additive to the bottom line, right? And so we set a target of mid-teens operating profit, and anything that was below that, we said either you had to get to plus 15% or we're going to move on from you. And so we divested of a few brands. And then from a brand structure, we had UGG, and then we had others, which was Teva, Hoka, Sanuk at that time. And so we basically laid it out as UGG, and then we started Koolaburra, which is a sub-brand, and said, that's your fashion lifestyle group. You guys are one team. And then the other one was performance lifestyle group. try to create synergies and efficiencies. And, at the time I said to Sanuk and Teva, your job is improve your profit. Don't worry about growth, get above 15%, and we'll see in a couple of years after you've done that. And then, so we really focused our attention on UGG. And at the time, Hoka was brand new. Like if it was maybe $50 million, $100 million, if that. And quickly realized that's the biggest market. It's the biggest opportunity. Let's create savings across the organization to funnel into, pushing that brand as hard as we could.
It's interesting looking back to this is probably 2016, 17, when you had a lot of the focus from the sneakerheads. You had GOAT, you had StockX, and big boom on everything from Jordans to Yeezy, and then from Adidas to New Balance, and all the trading of sneakers. And then, as I recall, you start to get into things that are a little bit more athletic, maybe a little bit more performance. You have Allbirds comes on. When did Hoka start to really come into its own and be like, this, there's a real business here?
There's a turning point there. Yeah. Probably 2018 was the first real signs of hey, this could be big, and the strategy for Hoka always was, and this, I credit people before me or people on the team for this decision, is just focus on run specialty, be close to the athletes, work with the best, most crazy athletes in the world because they were running 100-mile trail races, and then, really partner with the run specialty channel. And if you can become legitimate and authentic in that channel, then you have the authenticity to go elsewhere. And so once we started seeing how successful we were in run specialty, then it was, let's push online, let's get into different distributions. And I think at some point we saw a turning point there that people started emailing us and calling us saying, these shoes have changed my life. I can run again. I can walk again. I've lost weight. It helps my plantar fasciitis. And we were like, this is something completely different than hardcore running and trail racing. And so we never really marketed to that or pushed it, but we kind of let it happen.
It's interesting when looking at Hoka, stepping back and looking at it from my perspective. I think about function, I think about fashion, and I think about comfort.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at Hoka in that space, the pie, what do you think is really driving the Hoka business today? Because, congratulations, it's over $1 billion brand, which is amazing. You have two brands that are doing over $1 billion, Uggs and Hoka.
Yep.
But what do you think is really driving this trend, this passion, this wanting to be a member of the club?
Yeah, that's a good description for it. I liken Hoka to Patagonia, which is like this sacred brand that people are devoted to, right? And no matter what Patagonia does, they'll buy Patagonia. I'm one of those people. Hoka gives people unbelievable comfort with performance. And it's almost 50-50. And depending what your aspirations are as an athlete, or you're just looking for comfort, it feels amazing underfoot, but it also helps you move faster because of the geometry and the foam and all the, the technical sides to it. And then it has become fashionable versus trying to be fashion.
It's interesting how it's been adopted. And you look at it today, we were doing some analysis of social to see how well you're performing socially on the different channels. And the growth in social, Instagram in particular, is up over 16%. That's relative to your peer group, and you're still looking at On in that group and Allbirds, Nike, Adidas, so on. It's like the top growth is coming out of social. So wondering, going back to the appeal of the brand around being, hey, I love the way these look. I love the way they feel. I love the way they perform, and really trying to figure out what is the key driver, and whatever that final outcome is that a strategy to move it in one direction, or is that just happening to you?
A little of both, if I'm honest. We always call it the Hoka ride. And we were never able to figure out and describe it in marketing. We talked about how do you describe this to people? And that's where we came up with fly, because it feels like you're flying. It's a secret formula of the ride. But I remember I took a trip to Kona in Hawaii because we were a sponsor of the Ironman Championships. And I remember being there and just this is unbelievable. 30% of runners are going off of the finish line in Hoka. And most people in the world hadn't even heard of it yet. And then I went to Tokyo to see the team. And I remember going into Dover Street Market. And Hoka was there next to Gucci and Balenciaga and all these guys. And I was like, and they said it's sold out. And I was like, all right, the top athletes in the world are wearing this, and the top fashion influencers are buying it. Something's going on here.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. Do you have any collaborations going on? I mean, there's a number of them that have happened with, as you've seen, with Gucci picking up Adidas.
Yeah, that one's
What
amazing.
are you doing, Dave?
Well, the strategy on collaborations was really smart in Hoka, I would say. We started really high-end engineered garments and, very, very selective high-end, because that community was already tuned on to us. We did at the time, Outdoor Voices was actually pretty important to give us, right? Free people with movement, so that's a whole nother conversation, is collabs and how important they are. But we always went very high up the pyramid to high-end designer brands, niche brands that made a statement versus mass sales. And that created kind of a frenzy in the footwear world.
Transition over to Uggs. Keeping a brand how old is Uggs as a brand? How long has it been around?
78, so 25 years.
How do you keep
That's right. I better double check that.
Yeah. How do you keep it new? How do you keep it fresh? I mean, you have a big design team for Uggs. I mean, what do you do every day to keep new product coming in? Because I think last year you had a big win. You had a new release. I think you had a wedge shoe.
Yeah, platform.
My wife was looking for the wedge shoe. And I know when she's going out there looking for, I need an Ugg shoe. I'm like, what? It's like my kid saying, Dad, I want something from Gap. What?
Yeah.
You just didn't hear that.
Right.
So what do you do to keep it relevant and keep it fresh?
So Uggs a really interesting story, because it was the kind of product that once it's in your closet, it's always in your closet. And we're learning the same thing with Hoka, by the way. And so, but the average consumer was buying a pair of Uggs every 2.5 years, because they would just wear it and they just replace the classic, or they'd replace the slipper. So we really were a one-trick pony. It was 85% of our business was classic, even though we had all these other shoes and sandals and clogs and heels, but it got stagnant. And I think what we've been able to do over the years is a combination of marketplace management, and scarcity of inventory, leveraging the DNA of the brand. And that's really taken off in the last 5 years, where we've really, anything that we create, whether it's a sneaker, a sandal, that if it has the right UGG DNA and it's distinct, it'll sell. The minute, and we've done this a lot, as we copy other brands and we just do a sneaker and throw a logo on it, they bomb. And so we're getting really good now at leveraging the DNA of our brands. And if you talk to the team now, we used to have one big item that, every brand's lucky to have one or two big items. We now have 5. We have the classic, we have the mini, we have the platform, we have the Tasman, we have the new Mel. And so then also changed our marketing. Influencers, we opened up the lens on diversity big time. We were very specific in our marketing. You were blonde, you were white, and you had a certain style. We made a commitment to diversity of all of our brands about 6 years ago. And we said, we're going to commit to, at least 50-60% of our advertising is going to have diverse people in it. And that's been a game changer for us. And we realized we actually had a massive diverse consumer base we weren't even talking to. And so we've just repositioned the whole brand, cleaned up the assortment, and leveraged the DNA and brought that kind of style and comfort to all the styles that we have.
With both brands being as big as they are, how do you see the transition away from wholesale and towards D2C? Where are you today? Where do you want to be 24, 36 months?
Yeah. We've set targets for ourselves of going to be 50-50, right? And, we're almost 40% DTC now. I think it's less about a hard target and it's more about what feels right, right? And you got to make sure you have the right partners in wholesale that represent the brand the right way. You make the product scarce, right? You limit your inventory. And if your brand is strong enough, they will come to DTC to get what they want if they can't find it in wholesale. So we're slowly migrating. The one thing I've said to the teams recently, and this could be controversial for listeners or anybody in the industry, is I feel at this point in some ways wholesale is holding us back. So the thinking now is how do we maximize our reach through each channel and beyond, not build product for the channel. And so wherever that resting spot is, and each brand is different, I think it's more on tuition. Obviously, financially, DDC is a better model for us, that all the data, the lifetime value, the margins, but wholesale will always be important because it allows us to reach more consumers and showcase them.
International in general looks like it's really gaining an important place in your portfolio. I think the last annual report I saw, about 30% of your total business is now international, growing a little bit faster than the domestic business. Are there any markets that you're not in, or I'll ask it this way, what's the next market you may enter?
Well, one thing to think about, we've always been hovering between 30-35% of international, and it's been growing. But the problem is through COVID in the last 3 to 4 years, the US business just skyrocketed. So the pie hasn't really changed. Now we're starting to see more growth in international, in Europe for both brands, in Asia. And we have, if you look at UGG, we have real strength, in our European markets and some in Japan and China, right? But if you look at Hoka, it's 4 seasons, it's global, everybody runs. We have real hotspots. Like Scandinavia is the Nordics is our most penetrated market, and it's a distributor. Partners in Korea and Thailand and Indonesia, I mean, they're all killing it with Hoka. So, those aren't massive markets, but they're emerging for us. And then China just remains an incredible opportunity for both brands.
You look at the size of the business today, it's pretty impressive. I was looking at just some of the stats that are out there, looking at the market cap of Deckers, a $13 billion plus market cap, it's almost 2 times Ralph Lauren. It's not quite 2 times On, but you look at some of these other companies out there, it was amazing. I was looking at the market cap of Macy's, Kohl's, and Nordstrom's, Macy's, and Kohl's.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the size of Deckers today, the market cap at 13 plus billion, it's amazing how big it is relative to some of the other brands and retailers that we've grown up with.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Looking at Ralph Lauren, which is under an $8 billion market cap, which is crazy, or another company, a competitor of yours, which would be On. I mean, they're an $8 billion plus market cap. So definitely a premium that's out there in the footwear business. Now looking at how quickly Hoka is growing. I mean, I think this year your report was just over 1.4 billion with 58% growth.
Yeah.
I mean, totally amazing, with Uggs at 1.9 billion. At some point, probably in the not too distant future, maybe by the end of 2024, the two brands may be pretty close to the same size.
Yeah, a little internal competition going on.
So back to the question I asked you earlier, are there any shared services between Hoka and UGG on the back end?
Yeah, I meant to address this when you asked it. One of the things we set up early on is what I call centers of excellence. And so at the time, we created, the first one we set up was insights and digital marketing. And so this was controversial at the time and still has a little bit of tension, but we pulled all the marketing spend and activation out of the brands and said, your job in the brands is best in class creative. And we set up a center of excellence around marketing, around insights, obviously HR and all the other functions. But we also have centers of excellence around retail and e-commerce. And so they manage all brands. So the brand's job, and I this is from experience, because when the brand's job is best in class product, experiences, and creative. Don't worry about sales. Don't get distracted by all the wholesale partners, all that stuff. Do what you need to service them. But I want you spending 100% of your time on best in class product. And then we'll find experts to manage the other sides of the business. And that has served us, I think, really, really well, both from a leverage and a financial perspective, but also just getting the best talent in each of those functions.
And then on the other brands, are they pretty much operating in a similar fashion? I know that you've been focused on getting them to a certain level of profitability. Otherwise, they're not going to be at the table.
Yeah, and they did.
So achieving that, is there a support team for each that's shared, similar to the way you've structured Hoka and Uggs.
Yeah, all brands leverage the same centers of excellence, including innovation. I forgot about innovation. We have an innovation team that works with all the brands, and then the brands are developing their own internal innovation teams too. But
You mentioned marketing. What I hear a lot out there today is how tough it is, how expensive it is, certainly from a digital perspective,
yeah,
to market to the consumer. More happening within home. You're seeing catalogs. What's working from a marketing perspective at Deckers?
PR, PR, I think has been the game changer for us, and I give our PR teams a ton of credit because they are very, very selective, but they are so tuned in to the fashion world and the athletic world and leverage the power of authenticators in those spaces better than anybody I've seen it. And so that I would say that is the most powerful and most efficient. Digital marketing has been a game changer for us, but it's kind of running its course. And we're talking to the same people over and over again. So we're actually shifting more to top of funnel and testing connected TV and things more out at home so we can create more awareness and demand, which ultimately leads back to DTC.
I'm hearing a lot about connected TV is coming up
Yeah.
kind of across the board now as being the next medium to go after customers and just get a lot of buzz around it.
Yeah, and it's early days for us. We have to figure out how it's working still, but so far our instincts are saying it's helping. There's a lot more opportunity there.
We talked before we jumped onto the podcast. You mentioned you're doing some sponsorships and working with some athletes.
Yep.
Runners mostly. Is that a big part of the strategy to continue to sponsor events? You mentioned the Ironman, and then there's another event that you shared with me earlier. Maybe you can talk about it. It's the 100-mile race that takes place in France.
Chamonix, France. Yeah, it's called the UTMB, Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. And funny enough, the folks at Ironman ended up acquiring UTMB a couple of years ago. And they have, between them, I think they have probably over 150 races around the world that lead up to the championships for the Ironman. Generally in Hawaii, it's changed in the last couple of years. And then UTMB in Chamonix, France. So those are like the Olympics in the Ironman world and trail running world. And we're the primary sponsor for footwear for both. And so we get that global reach, we get authenticity globally, and we get all the content that we can generate, to show our authenticity. And then we support athletes within them. We don't look for the best athletes in the world because Nike will do that all day long and we don't have the budgets for those things. We look for the most badass, interesting, authentic, athletes that represent the values of the brand and can speak to more general consumers versus just, the LeBron James of the world.
It was last week, I'm trying to remember where the marathon was just run. It was almost a sub 2-hour marathon.
Yeah.
I think missed it by 35 seconds.
Short.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Insane.
And I just think that's like a barrier. That was like the 4-minute mile. It will never happen, but it's obviously going to fall.
It'll fall. Yeah.
I guess.
Hopefully you'll be wearing Hoka.
Yeah. But he might be up against Nike on that one or Adidas or someone on that one. Shifting gears one more time, talk a little bit about technology. You mentioned before the company had done a good job spending on technology where they needed to. What are some of the things that you've affected while you've been in place, and what are some of the things that still need to be affected to continue to grow from a technology perspective?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I think myself and the teams with me in my early days here was all the Omni Channel capabilities, and so buy online, pick up in store, right? All those service focused capabilities that made the shopping experience easier and better connected. And, we got a lot of recognition for that. I think our consumers, really recognized the work we were doing. That was a lot easier to implement a lot of these systems because a lot of it was process and things that you could bolt on. Now our ERP is going, needs to be updated. If you talk to any company, they all say the same thing. Our data is all over the place. And we're, early days of data science and AI and machine learning. So that's our next big focus. As really, the goal for me is I want our employees to have quick, real-time, trusted access to data so they can do their jobs. We're spending far too much time finding the data and organizing it when we should be analyzing it, looking for insights and acting on it. And so that's the journey we're on now. So now we're moving more to a, not one trick pony, but a more of a headless commerce approach. So there won't be a big SAP implementation in the future. I think that ship has sailed for us. There's other ways to do it now.
Whose e-commerce platform do you use?
We were always on Demandware in the early days, so now Salesforce. So that's kind of where we are. We looked at potentially going in-house and homegrown. We've done an incredible job. That order management system is internal. So those are the things we're exploring right now. Most efficient, easy to keep up with, faster changes on the fly when you need to do it.
Any use of video, or are you guys participating in TikTok and Reels, or any bang for the buck in the video space?
Yeah, TikTok has been a big game changer for us, especially for UGG. And, if you get one style that is shown, unboxed, by the right person, your demand can change overnight. And so, again, that's where I give the brand teams and the social teams and the PR teams a lot of credit. They're really leveraging TikTok. They're leaning into TikTok like we never have before. And we're seeing real benefits from it.
I assume with the growth in China too, that'll continue to be very important.
Yeah, they have different, social...
leveraging video and whether it's shoppable video, live stream video, it's $1 trillion business in Asia.
And I've always been a fan of user-generated content. It just feels more real. And, I think these big, long brand videos with, highly produced and all that stuff, it's just inauthentic. And it doesn't, you spend all your money on creating it, you have no media money left.
True. Ready for rapid fire, Dave?
I guess so.
Okay. All right. I won't ask the Mark Schneider question. Never mind. Mark, you're out. I have the best boss and mentor.
Best boss and mentor. It's hard to say one. I honestly, truly feel like I've been blessed with many mentors and bosses, yourself included, Mickey included, some of the people I mentioned at Gap, Mark for sure still is, right? I call him Ken Pucker, Jack Boys at Converse, like the people that I mentioned before have left an indelible mark on me. And I just feel super blessed that they believed in me. They gave me opportunities and trusted me. And, a lot of them I would still consider friends, and which is hard in this industry, right?
It is, keeping friends.
Yeah. And so I have a handful of, I don't have many, but I have a handful of real trusted mentors that I've been fortunate to work with.
Favorite streamed show?
Streamed show?
Yeah.
Peaky Blinders.
Comes up a lot.
Yeah, that was damn good.
I loved it. Who would you most like to meet?
I think Bono. Have you read his book?
I have not.
It's fascinating. Like you think of Bono as a musician, but when you actually, think about all the things he's done to support Africa and, AIDS relief and just a global citizen, he's such a dynamic dude, but he's still a punk in his heart. He's a rock and roll guy and real humble beginnings. His daughter's an incredible actress, by the way. I would like to have dinner with him. Or Dave Grohl.
Favorite apparel brand?
Oh, man. I'm so disappointed in apparel these days. Man, that's so tough. Probably Patagonia, just because I can't think of anybody else. I do love James Purse. I hate their prices because it's so overpriced, but I love the product. I would say those two.
If you had to pick another country to live in, which country would you pick?
Oh, man. I've lived in London, in England, in the UK. Love that, but I've done it. I was just in France and Italy, and I'd probably say Italy at this point. Or Portugal, but still gritty, still authentic, great food, great culture, just the right view on life.
The next question may get deleted by the team here, but if you could add one more brand to your portfolio, forgetting the price, just because you love it, you believe in it, what brand would it be?
Well, there's a financial view to that, and there's a personal view to that.
Let's go with the personal view.
Personal view is Patagonia.
Okay.
I just think they're just, they're consistent. They're starting, in some ways, consistently boring in their product, but just the values. I love the way Chenard thinks about, the business.
Favorite hobby?
Either mountain biking or skiing. And I hope to have many more in the future. I have a lot of interest.
And with that, Dave, we're going to land the plane on this flight of the Retail Pilot. Thanks for joining me today. It's been great to hang out.
Yeah.
Share some stories, some memories, and hear what you're doing. And just by the way, I think everybody should know, since Dave has been at the helm, I may get this wrong, you'll have to correct me, I think the stock has appreciated 10x since the time you took over the role.
Yeah, probably around there. It's unbelievable to think of, honestly.
It's super, super impressive.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Congratulations.
It means a lot. At the end of the day, you just care about your people first, and the rest just happens. That's the way I look at it. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Dave.
It's been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.